I'm David Fetter, Executive Editor Technical for the Prepared Foods Network, and I'm welcoming you to another Prepared Foods dive into the strategies in the field of food and beverage product development. Today, we have a special presentation and a timely one on natural food colors. The gradual shift in dominance from artificial food colors to natural ones got a huge push, a shove really, into overdrive at the beginning of the year when newly appointed Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made banning artificial food colors one of his primary crusades. For food and beverage developers, this wasn't a blindside. Consumers have been moving the dial in this direction anyway for at least the past decade or two. But now that the timeline's accelerating, we asked in Dr. Abby Thiel, food scientist and expert in ingredient functionality and food innovation, and host of the popular Abby the Food Scientist YouTube show, to give us some of the lowdown on what the shift from artificial to natural food coloring could entail. So, welcome, Dr. Thiel.
Hi, David. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you aboard. Let's set the record straight. This is not about whether or not natural colors or artificial colors are better or worse than each other. This is no politics. We're just aware of the need for many product makers to shift to natural colors, that this need has just moved up. So, what are some of the challenges a product maker might have with a natural food colorant that they wouldn't have with an artificial one?
Well, let's talk about economy first, because there is really a limited availability of some of these natural colorants, especially if they're quite rare or maybe they're more seasonal when they're grown and produced. So this is going to lead to some pretty big supply chain disruptions, maybe price volatility and certain production delays, making it difficult to maintain sort of consistent product quality and supply. That being said, color makers, have made pretty big advances ensuring, supplies and quality, that these colors are stable in recent years. So this is becoming less and less a concern.
Oh, good. Well, what are some of the issues related to the hurdles in general in making that transition?
Yes, so when you're going to be using natural colorants, you're almost always going to be using a higher concentration than your artificial colorants. And this can have a lot of downstream effects. So this is going to possibly impact the taste or flavor of your product because you're using this color at a higher level. So you might have to look in something like flavor maskers being added to your product. It's also possible because of these higher concentrations that these natural colorants, they're more likely to also affect the texture of your product as well.
Wow, that we usually think in terms color, color, keep it in that box, but affecting texture as well. So that's what other touch points are there in the production chain that could present a challenge using these natural colorants?
Yeah, so I actually think, unfortunately, there is quite a few ways through the entire production chain. First and foremost, with these type of ingredients, although prices are falling, they're becoming lower. Natural colorants are still going to be more expensive. And then you sort of have to take into account in certain formulations, in certain foods, you also use these colorants at a higher concentration. So you need to account for that as an increase in the product's cost as well. So,
Right.
not only is the initial ingredient cost higher for natural colorants, you might also be using that ingredient more compared to artificial colors.
Wow. So, and this whole thing, I'm guessing, could lead to other issues as well.
Yes, yeah, just one example that came to mind was like during manufacturing, you might need some extra cold storage available since many of these natural colorants actually should be stored in the refrigerated space. So, not
Oh,
at room temperature like you're probably used to doing with artificial colorants. Another point, artificial colors or certified colors, as they're actually called, oftentimes we sort of throw those in at the end of product formulation because they're certified colors, meaning that every batch is the same. They have been tested. They don't degrade due to sheer temperature, moisture, fat. They're just such a stable ingredient This is not going to be the case when you're switching to natural colorants. So I'd advise product developers, play with that natural color earlier on in that product development process because they are going to be more challenging to work with, especially in regards to flavor and texture.
All right. Wow. So, are there other areas of concern that product developers should consider while making this shift?
So, one area that I think will be quite difficult is that natural colorants, these ingredients, they actually interact with a lot of other food ingredients, and we don't see that with artificial colorants. So, this can be a huge issue because certain foods with like oxidizing or reducing agents, they can trigger color changes in if you use natural colors. So, I'm talking about things that contain metal ions like iron, copper, magnesium, aluminum. These can actually accelerate how fast those natural colors degrade. And so, for example, if you formulate a sports drink, with a lot of electrolytes, a lot of these ions, you do want to be careful about what natural colorant you're using and check how long that shelf life will be.
Whoa. So, yeah, you think of, like you said, sports drinks or anything that you're putting a multivitamin mineral
Mhm.
powder in there. Bingo, you got your metal ions, and that's a huge thing. What else can you tell us is coming into this mix?
Yes, so one other thing I want to mention quickly, just because I think it's easily looked over, is you also want to look at your water quality, and water's in most, if not all, foods, because water quality often there's certain ions present if your water's treated or untreated, hard or soft. And again, I just want to remind people that those can actually degrade the natural colorants. They can interact again with the natural colorants, so you're going to want to test your water and see does it impact the shade or stability of these ingredients.
Wow. So that's I would call that a hidden area of
Yes.
concern. Anything else hiding that we should know about?
Yes, so I think this one's really important for we have a lot of like health-driven food products being launched right now. And so I often think of like probiotics or live bacteria added to usually fermented products, something like your yogurts, that type of thing. But these probiotics, these microorganisms and active cultures, they can also interact with some natural colorants. So, for
Uh,
example, lactobacillus species contributes to a lot of color instability when you use natural colorants and lactobacillus in products. So if you are formulating a probiotic food, I would do a bit of research into what natural colorant might be best.
so is it because they're producing acid as they
So
grow and do their work
yeah,
and
they're producing acid and other bacterial metabolites that they have sort of a chemical interaction, and you'll see the natural colorants start to fade and degrade over time. So it really leads to this change in appearance. And I would say we're lucky the natural colorant industry has made really great strides in the appearance of products. They're getting more like vivid colors that match the artificial colors, but they're not quite there yet. Often it's not going to be as bright as an artificial color. So we also have to consider what are the consumers expecting? Because right now, especially American consumers, I think are used to the really bright, artificially colored products. And you will see in some cases, there's not a natural color that maybe can 100% match that. And I know at first you might think, well, that's fine, like we will adjust. But the problem is that how a food appears, a consumer sort of judges the flavor intensity or the taste intensity with how vivid that color is. And so if we switch to natural colorants, consumers might start perceiving your product's flavor a bit differently because after all, I mean, we eat with our eyes, we judge food the second we see it.
well, that reminds me of something that happened. Oh gosh, this is even years ago. A friend of mine with a small child gave that child raspberries,
Mhm.
and the kid was like blown away. Do you know why? Because raspberries, they weren't blue. Because for some reason, raspberry flavor in candies and cereals and that has someone decided it should be blue, I guess, to
Right.
separate it from cherry and strawberry. But I just remember these people. These aren't raspberries; they're not blue.
This is true. I grew up always wanting like blue slushies, and it's like a bright, vivid blue.
Mhm.
It's like not it's blue raspberry, but real raspberries are not that color.
They will be someday. I'm sure
Yes,
someone's
yes.
hybridizing one of those. Now, I know Europe's been transitioning away from artificial colors for a number of years now, and it does seem that the less vibrant hued products are more accepted over there. I mean, I've seen comparisons in things like cereals, Fruit Loops,
Hmm.
Trix, the European versus the American, and the acceptance rate by Europeans is not only much higher, but I think it's almost a plus.
Hmm.
So,
No, I would agree with that. So I recently lived in Europe for 2 years, and so it was kind of funny as an American to be over there. But what I noticed is they have sort of have like different expectations for how a food looks. And I think still Americans are really used to wanting like the brightest food possible. If I had to guess, because that makes you think it's very flavorful or it's very sweet, something like that.
wow. So, and would there be any other effects that appearance has that
Yes. So what's interesting is the appearance can actually sort of point to some shelf life issues because, like I
really?
mentioned, colors are degrading or sort of fading faster than an artificial color ever would. And so, if you're a product developer, you might want to reassess your shelf life once you switch out to a natural colorant, just because you're going to see like these shifts in colors. Maybe you lose color much faster, and you might want to actually shorten the shelf life to make sure the consumer doesn't see, maybe a off-hued or gray product, something like that. Because again, they're going to judge the product. They're going to think, you changed the taste or the flavor by just, the appearance is so different.
Oh, so it's really from two different ends because you've got your manufacturer is going to have to put a shorter sell by date, and then if they don't in the store, it's going to be pulled sooner because it's
Hmm.
changed color, and boom, you got a shorter shelf life just on appearance alone. So wow. So what can product makers do to offset these appearance challenges?
Yeah, I think this is a tricky one because with natural colorants, more doesn't always mean brighter or better or something like that. So just throwing in more and more of a natural colorant isn't going to continue to make it more vivid. So beyond a certain concentration, it's really not going to lead to any better of a looking product. It could actually make it more dull or like a muddy appearance rather than like a
Hmm.
bright, vivid one. So really you want to take some time like fine tuning with your natural, colorants because it's going to be trial and error. There's not like a quick trick for this. You might also need to reconsider packaging. So, especially when you switch to natural colorants, if it's exposed to light or moisture. So, you really want to make sure there's a good barrier, a good packaging, so that those things don't come in contact with your colorant and, start degrading or fading it even faster. So, look at packaging maybe with a UV barrier or a good oxygen barrier, a good moisture barrier, that type of thing.
Or all three.
Yes.
So, wow. I'm sorry we've run out of time because I know you got your own video podcast, Abby the Food Scientist, to get ready for. But I'm really pleased you spent time with us and shared a wealth of information in a short time. This is great. On making this shift from artificial to natural colorants. And I also want to thank our audience for joining us. Again, I'm David Fetter, Executive Editor Technical for the Prepared Foods Network. And we were learning about natural colors for foods and beverages from Dr. Abby the food scientist. And you'll find more on colorants and many other topics of interest for food and beverage developers right here at preparedfoods.com. So thank you for joining us, and till next time.